Okay, so let's just jump right in. When you think about solving the world's biggest problems, climate change, social inequality, injustice, is theology the first thing that pops into your head? Probably not. But what if it could be? A group of thinkers just got together to argue that faith, if we look at it in a new way, might hold some powerful keys to these massive crises we're all facing.
Our story starts right here in Recife, Brazil, at something called the International Colloquium on Theological Education. And look, this was not your typical stuffy academic conference. It was a space specifically designed for a whole new kind of conversation, bringing people in from all over the world to ask some really tough questions about what faith is even for in our modern world.
And this was the big one. This was the central question driving the whole thing. It's a pretty bold question, right? It takes these ancient spiritual traditions and connects them directly to the most urgent, real-world fights we're in today. It's a challenge to stop seeing faith as just some private belief and start seeing it as a public force for real change. Now, to even begin to answer a question that huge, everyone there agreed on one thing. We need a whole new conversation. The old ways of thinking, the assumptions we've held for centuries, they're just not cutting it anymore. It's time to rethink everything, literally from the ground up. So what's at the heart of the problem? Well, for the thinkers at this colloquium, it comes down to a powerful and often invisible force that has shaped religion across the globe for centuries, a deeply colonial mindset. And this isn't about pointing fingers at the past. It's about understanding a legacy that is still very, very much alive today. See, the issue isn't really with faith itself. It's with a very specific, narrow, and often Eurocentric version of it that was basically exported around the world. And this kind of one-size-fits-all approach had a massive cost. It pushed aside, and in many cases just completely erased, countless other ways of understanding the divine and our place in the universe. To really get this, we have to understand this key term they used, coloniality. Professor Niklas Penalto broke it down like this. It's not just about historical colonialism, flags and armies. It's a deep structure of power, a way of thinking that keeps running in the background. It ranks certain cultures, certain people, and certain ways of knowing as superior to others. It's like the software that keeps running long after the colonial hardware has been taken away. And the consequences of this colonial software, they are very real. It's been used to justify oppression, create all sorts of harmful hierarchies, and that first point is just staggering. Epistemicide. It means the literal killing of knowledge systems. Think about that. Entire libraries of wisdom from indigenous and African traditions were just dismissed, called evil, or flat out destroyed. This quote from Brother Paulo Ueti really captures the frustration. He's saying that this rigid, inherited religious model can sometimes just shut down our ability to think critically. So the call here is to undumb us down, to switch our brains and our spirits back on in a more critical and liberating way. So if the dominant story is the problem, where do we find the solution? Well, it has to come from the very voices that have been pushed to the margins for so long. And that's where things get really interesting, because what you find is this powerful chorus of alternatives. First up, you have Indigenous Theologies. Now, this isn't a theology that was built in a library or a seminary. It's one that's rooted in the land, in ancestry, in a deep, living relationship with what one speaker called the cosmic family. The plants, the animals, the rivers, the whole web of life. I mean, this quote from Professor Jacobet Solano just says it all, doesn't it? For Indigenous peoples, things like memory and song and spirituality, they aren't just quaint cultural artifacts. They are active tools of resistance and survival against centuries of trying to be erased. Then you have another incredibly powerful alternative that comes from Black theologies. This was born from the Afro-diasporic experience, from slavery, from struggle, but also from incredible resilience. This is a faith that was literally forged in the fire of the fight for liberation. It goes back and rereads sacred texts through the eyes of the oppressed, and what it finds are messages of justice and freedom. And check out this fascinating concept from Professor Clusa Caldera, Teoquilombism. It's a theology inspired by the Quilombos, which were communities of escaped slaves in Brazil who formed their own self-sufficient societies. So the theology is all about a practical, real-world hope. It's focused on building just communities right here, right now, not just waiting for some reward in the afterlife. So the one thing all these different voices have in common is a willingness to be incredibly bold, a willingness to question everything, even the most basic, fundamental assumptions of institutional religion that a lot of us just take for granted.
Now, this quote from Reverend Bruno Almeida might make you do a double take, but his point is actually really profound. He's not attacking a religion. He's arguing that the divine, that source of love and justice in the universe, is way too big, way too vast to be contained by any single religion or institution or label. It's a call to look for the sacred everywhere, especially in places and traditions that were once demonized. Okay, so we have the critique and we have these amazing alternatives. But what does a decolonized faith actually look like in the real world? How do we get from these powerful ideas to actual concrete action?
Well, the path forward really boils down to 3 clear steps. First, listen. And I mean really listen, especially to voices from the margins. Second, rethink your sources. Who are the authors you read? Whose knowledge do you see as legit? And third, act. This is about something called praxis. It's the idea that your belief and your action are inseparable. They're 2 sides of the same coin. Your faith is what you do.
So what all of this points to is a theology that isn't just an abstract set of rules in a book. It's a lived thing. It's a faith that is embodied, grounded in the real world, that's supportive of community, that's radically open to people who are different, and is always, always focused on the common good for everyone.
And, doing this kind of work, it takes some real courage. Brother Pauliwetti urged everyone there to be scandalous, because a theology that's actually relevant today, he argued, has to be bold enough to scandalize the powerful, to disrupt the systems of oppression, even the ones that exist inside of religion itself.
I love this quote from Bishop Humberto Maistegui. It offers such a powerful guide. In a world that's always chasing the next new thing, he's suggesting that maybe our greatest resource for dealing with today's crises is the ancient wisdom of our ancestors, those deep wells of knowledge that coloniality tried so hard to bury.
So where does all this leave us? Well, the gathering in Recife wasn't about finding some final, perfect answer. It was really about starting a process, about recognizing that this is the ongoing work of a lifetime, of a generation. And this leads to what might be the final goal, which Bishop Humberto called a theology of not knowing. It's basically a call for humility, especially for those of us who come from places of privilege. It means letting go of the need to have all the answers, and instead being willing to learn from the ground up, from the people and from the land, to build a faith that can actually help sustain a planet for all of us.
Which leaves us with this final, really vital question. The conversation in Brazil was incredible for amplifying voices that have been sidelined for way too long, but the work is nowhere near finished. If faith is ever going to be a true force for justice in this world, we all have to keep asking ourselves, whose stories are still missing? Whose wisdom have we not yet heard?